Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Before I started doing this job, I had the same attitude towards firefighters that you have, a sort of notional gratitude, a sort of sense of them being an integral part of our society, a profession filled with people who are probably braver than the rest of us, or many of the rest of us, and yet I hadn't given it a huge amount of thought. Quite soon after starting this job, it became a big issue for Londoners as industrial action was threatened and assaults upon the dignity and pensions of the firefighters were undertaken by local government. I also had the single, I've had quite a few since, as you might be aware, but the single most unpleasant encounter with a politician was as a result of firefighters and the fire service. It was a bloke called Brian something who used to be Boris's advisors on firefighters, and he sat in this studio and tried to defend the closures of stations and engines. I wish we should dig out the audio. It's actually a bit of a collector's item, this. I promise you, I'm not blowing smoke up my own fundament. He sat in this studio, and then when the lights went off, when the mics went off, so you couldn't hear anymore, he turned to me and he said, "Do you really think Boris Johnson doesn't know exactly what's going on?" And he'd just been denying it all on air. And I did something quite cheeky. I don't know if I've ever given you the inside version of this story. I said on air when we came back, I said, "Now we're back from the travel news, and Brian Thingamajobs is still with us, banging on about why firefighters don't deserve any respect or gratitude from the people of London." And I said to Jones, the engineer who was working with me at the time, I said to him, "We've got all that on tape, haven't we, that this chap just said during the break? We've got it all on tape. You've never seen it. I tell you what, you think we had fireworks when Farage got dragged out of the studio by his own PR people? You should have seen the look on that man's face when he thought I'd recorded what he said when you couldn't listen." That's why I got so confused subsequently when firefighters failed to garner the levels of public support that they should. Because when they warned later that closing fire stations, this is going back to 2014 now, would not affect the quality of services the fire service could offer, it just seemed unlikely to me. Dr. Benjamin Taylor is a statistician at Lancaster University who has undertaken the first comprehensive research into whether or not the former mayor was telling you the truth when he said that the quality of services would not be hit. I guess the most obvious area to test that would be in response times. And Dr. Taylor joins me on the line now. Dr. Taylor, what have you found?
Good morning, James. Yes, so my analysis, I thought to identify the areas that have been affected by the closures, and perhaps unsurprisingly, around all 10 fire stations that were closed in 2014, there have been quite substantial changes in the response times due to these closures.
And I mean, short of just rolling one's eyes and barking at the moon, as a professional statistician, you were presumably expecting to find this. Or do you not work like that? Do you enter into it with clear eyes and objectivity?
I literally entered into this analysis with clear eyes and objectivity. I became interested in it, obviously because it was a big story back in 2014.
Yes.
But I guess, if you go and close a fire station, then somehow the system has to adjust to that.
So we're looking at the percentage of responses that exceed the 6-minute target, right? The idea, the target is 6 minutes from emergency being received to appliance arriving at scene of emergency. What give us some numbers, Benjamin? What sort of numbers did you unearth?
Well, before the closures, most areas were performing very well in terms of meeting this 6-minute target. But my analysis has identified some areas around these closed stations where now only around 50% of engines are meeting that target.
So you could, almost claim that. That's quite a huge shift. Sorry to sound surprised. I didn't realise you were going to go for a number like 50%.
In some areas, the change has been from almost no problem at all to 50% of engines. Now, in the grand picture, the fire brigade state that their average response times haven't been affected enormously, and that's true. But I'm interested in what's happened around these stations. There certainly has been an impact there.
So the average attendances wouldn't be affected because that would be taking the mean from a much bigger sample rather than looking specific.
Exactly that.
Wow, my E grade in AO level statistics has come in useful 25 years after the event. Whoever thought that was going to happen? And when the London Fire Brigade say our average attendance times are among the best in the country, they're indulging perhaps, so you don't have to comment on this because I appreciate it's not your brief. There's a bit of whataboutery going on there because London is such a condensed habitation that we're bound to be quicker than, for example, Cornwall or the wilds of the Highlands of Scotland.
Yeah. But there are certainly a lot of fire stations in London, obviously over 100.
So saying that our attendance times are among the best in the country is not a counter to your finding. It's simply an almost irrelevant observation.
It's an observation, I would say.
Well, this is amazing work. What are you doing next? Where do you go? Is that it now? You publish and then return to the ivory towers of academia, or are you going to carry on pursuing this?
Well, I'm currently wondering whether there's any way I could sort of follow this analysis up by looking at sort of outcomes as a result of, perhaps health outcomes as a result of these closures.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, keep in touch. We'd love to know more about that as well. But on behalf of the firefighters of London, who occasionally pay me the compliment of suggesting that they get better representation on this programme than anywhere else in the British media, I'd thank you for confirming what they warned us would happen 2.5 years ago. Unfortunately, Boris Johnson is not available for interview. Quick clarification of something we talked about in the last hour with regard to the research undertaken by that really charming statistician we spoke to. The bloke I was talking about, I think I called him Brian Thingamybobs. A few of you have been in touch to remind me. His name was Brian Coleman, and he was actually, after our encounter, by far the most unpleasant encounter I've had with anyone as a journalist. He was convicted of attacking a woman and subsequently expelled from the Conservative Party. Just keep you in the loop, you know. And that was the bloke that Boris Johnson sent to me to defend the closure of fire stations and fire appliances, which the statistician was explaining about half an hour ago has seen an increase in response times in the region in some stations, around some stations, of 50%. But